Good day, grade nines. We will be looking at the French Revolution and revising some of this work today. Right, firstly, we would like to inquire and find out, why did the French Revolution come about? Why did it happen? Right, so there were people in France that were very unhappy. We'll find out a bit later of the different social structures that appeared during this time period of 1789. The first reason, that there was social inequality. People were not equal, and they found this to be very unfair. As a result of this, we had very rich people and very poor people, and this would cause an economic crisis. Secondly, people suffered from a growing population that outpaced the food supply. Because of the growing population, food became a problem. There was a shortage of food. There was starvation, famine, and rising prices of bread broke France in 1789. These are the main reasons why the French Revolution happened: social inequality, economic crisis, the growing population, famine, and the rising prices of bread. France at the time was divided into three estates. This is very important. Okay, the clergy, which formed the hierarchy, then the nobility and the peasants. The peasants were the very poor people. The clergy were people of the cloth, or people, religious people. Okay, and then we had the nobility. Peasants were heavily taxed. Okay, so the poorer people, they were taxed heavily, and they had to work for the clergy, and they struggled to survive. They hated this, as more privileges were granted to clergy and nobles. They wanted equality. They wanted fairness. They wanted the rich to also be taxed. And they wanted, if we go back to the previous slide, they wanted power in the economy. The peasants soon declared themselves a national assembly. They wanted to set up a constitutional government that would make nobility and clergy pay taxes too. Okay, so these are the main fundamental, important reasons for the French Revolution coming about. So we can see here as well that in 1789, the Assembly declared that they will not disband until a new constitution be written. They were adamant, they were rebellious, but they were fighting for their right of equality. King Louis decided to use force against the third party. Who was the third party? The third party were the peasants, the poorer people. The peasants rebelled, and King Louis agreed to abide to their requests. So they were very persistent in their rebellious actions, and this gave King Louis no other option but to abide to what they wanted. And then we see that the monarchy that ruled France for centuries collapsed in 3 years due to the peasants uprising and forming their National Assembly. The French society underwent an epic transformation. There were a lot of changes that started occurring during this time period. And here we see also in the last point, the new Enlightenment ideas that depended on equality, citizenship, and human rights replaced the old ideas about traditions, hierarchy, and religious authority. So the people, the peasants, okay, they eventually got to equality, fair citizenship, and the human rights that they so rightfully fought for. Here we see that the nobles, they tried to bring back the authority of the church, unable to handle the pressure from the peasants. The king's authority shifted with the new constitution. So now we come to a time where the king's authority had no more power over the peasants, but it shifted. His authority shifted with the new constitution formed by the peasants, known as the National Assembly. The revolution lasted until 1799, resulting in the abolition of the French royal family. The beginning of Napoleon Bonaparte's reign in France. This marked the beginning of his reign in France. And here we see that during the revolution, many people were sent to the guillotine to be beheaded in an era known as the Reign of Terror. So this was not just a passive revolution, but there were also acts of terror where people were beheaded during this time. The French celebrate their independence on the 14th of July of each year. Right, just so then we could have a little bit of practice to know what you should be taking out of these lessons, is that what factors led to a revolution in France? In other words, what caused it? what were the main causes as discussed in the beginning of the lesson relating to the French Revolution. Number 2, discuss the different estates that existed in the French society. And here we talk about the different social classes like the clergy, the nobles, and as well as the peasants. And what I'd like you to also do is to revisit the lesson in your book and also read a bit more in depth as to how the different estates and the roles that they played in the French society during this era. And what did the members of the third estate aim for? Number 3, we know that the third estate were the peasants. They were the low class of society considered in those days, and they aimed for things such as equality. They aimed for things such as an equal say in the economy, and also wanting the noble or the nobility and the clergy to pay taxes just like them. Right, grade 9s, this brings us to the end of this revision session. And I remember I asked you to also go to the French Revolution in your workbooks and read over those sections to make yourself more familiar and in depth as to what is required for preparing for your exams. Assalamu alaikum.